I'm hoping to make it onto the Skellig Islands, home to one of the most famous and impressive monastic sites from Ireland's ancient Christian world. It's somewhere I've longed to get to for years, but it's easier said than done. Well, there's a hardy man in the background there. It's lovely and fresh from here in Portmagee, in the very southwest of Kerry, opposite Valentia Island here, and we're trying to get out to the Skellig Rocks. Scene of a beautiful monastic settlement, and of course Star Wars was shot there, and I've tried on 2 separate occasions to get out there, didn't make it. The water's very treacherous, so we're just keeping our fingers crossed. That man looks like he could swim out. Thankfully today, the waters have calmed and we can dock in Blind Man's Cove. I've come here to meet 86-year-old veteran boatman, author and historian Des Lavelle, who knows this island from childhood. You're born and bred in Valentia Island. You've been a diver around here all your life. You know under the water, you know over the water.
And I've flown over the top too.
And you've flown over the top as well. This stretch of ocean was the main trade route right up into the Western Isles of Scotland and further into Norway, then down into North Africa and around into the Mediterranean. The Vikings used this route and the islands as connections all the way along the western seaboard of the Atlantic. The Skelligs are a UNESCO World Heritage Site, and perched 600 feet above sea level on this beautiful but inhospitable rock is the ancient monastic settlement I've been wanting to see. Thought to date back to somewhere between the 6th and 8th century AD, it was home to the monks of St. Fionn. Of course, they did a lot of fasting, and after 3, 4, 5 days of a fast, that's when you started to see the visions.
A lot of it may be enforced fasting when times were hard.
I suppose so, that's true.
When you couldn't catch a few puffins for your breakfast or whatever it took. But
they would have eaten the birds.
Yes, you can think whatever the sea would offer.
They couldn't grow anything here, of course. Are there still people who come here to try and find a spiritual connection with the place?
Yes, I'm absolutely sure of that. In my time, when I was boating, many people actually came to me and said, there's something special about the island. It would be people of no particular denomination whatsoever, but they felt something about the place, and I can agree with that. I can feel it too.
I'm going to head on up the top of the hill and have a look at the monastery days. I'll see you back at the boat. Slán!
Slán is benacht.
I've always been fascinated by how our ancestors lived such a remote existence in this inhospitable place. There are 618 steps that lead to the top, to the ancient monastery. And with every step, you feel a sense of peace, of being alone with the wild Atlantic Ocean. The island's only inhabitants are the tens of thousands of seabirds that live here in breeding season. Today, the island is quiet. No cries from the gannets or grunts from the puffins. Yet we are in the middle of the sea. You can almost hear the silence. I can understand why the monks were drawn here. The monastery is perched 180 meters above the ocean below. The monks built retaining walls to protect themselves from harsh winds and to create microclimates for growing food. They lived in individual cells shaped like beehives. The buildings were all corbelled, an arch-like construction technique that helped to keep their structures watertight. They had an oratory, an adjoining graveyard, and finally a church, St. Michael's, which was built centuries after the first settlement. Well, it looks like this day, like the Skelligs themselves, are going to disappear into the mist. What strikes me when I'm here is that at a time in the 6th and 7th centuries when the loudest thing you would have ever heard was a bell that men decided to come and isolate themselves in rocky islets like this here for the glory of God. It's definitely a spiritual place. It's hell's space. It's a very beautiful place. And I feel really privileged to have been here today and to have seen it. It'd be really good to spend the night here, though. That'll be really interesting. My journey continues as I head to the wild landscape of the Aran Islands off the Galway coast. To get there, I pass one of Ireland's most unusual and interesting terrains. The lunar landscape of the Burren is both rugged and serene. The formations date back 350 million years to a tropical sea. From here, it's a short ferry trip to get to the Aran Islands. The Aran Islands are one of the few places in Ireland that have remained virtually unchanged for centuries. It's a place lost in time. Years ago, living on these rugged and remote islands was a constant struggle. I'm meeting Cyril O'Flaherty, an artist who was born and bred here, to find out what island life is like today. What an amazing spot.
It is.
What's that headland called up there, sir?
That's Pointe Fian, the one that comes out at the bottom where the wave is breaking. It's a very wild place.
Yeah.
Look how calm it is today and there's a wave there, you know?
Yeah, yeah.
See that in winter now, the big ones go up at 25, 30 feet, well above that headland, and they'll come right over the corner. There's cliffs to the west there, and there's stones quarried on top of the cliff, where a big wave has come up every now and then, and it's hit it, and it's actually taken limestone slabs like this and tossed them on top. That's over about almost a 200-foot cliff.
You don't mess about with the sea.
No, you do not. Respect. Respect.
All the time.
You have to respect.
Scattered around the island are the ruins of many Celtic churches and forts. The most famous is the incredible Dunengus, perched 300 feet above the sea on the cliff edge. The origins of this 14-acre hill fort aren't fully known, but legend suggests it was created by the mythological race of the Fir Bolgs after they sought refuge on the island in the 1st century AD. Others believe it was built and occupied originally in the Iron Age. Once described as the most magnificent and barbaric monument in Europe, it's entirely surrounded by a dense band of jagged, upright stones. The perfect way to stop potential invaders. I've been exploring the whole fact that, you know, these islands were on the M1 of the ancient world. There was a route that led all the way up to Norway here, back through these islands, into the Mediterranean, the coast of North Africa and so forth.
We have evidence of long-distance trade as well, you know. On Inisheer, for instance, there's a mound, Clockrani, and there's pottery found there that made it all the way from Scotland, and that's during the Neolithic period.
So this would have been a really, really busy place, rather than the kind of the empty landscape
that
we
you
see today.
Population would have been greater as well. In 1821, there were over 2,500 people living on the islands. Today, we're down to about 850, 900. The golden period, I think, for us, was the monastic period on these islands.
Yes,
you know,
of
with
course.
14 monasteries and a link to Rome. Inda, who was the patron saint of the island, was offered the papacy of Rome, and popes have made their way to here on pilgrimage. Personally, I believe these were geysers, you know, or the desert, going into the desert, coming from that early Syria and the idea of removing yourself from all society to find yourself, you know. I suppose if you can't know yourself, how can you preach to anyone else?
Yeah, so this idea of going west, the furthest west you can go in the known world, to then kind of live in isolation and find yourself. There's a little bit of that still going on this day, even though it might be in a different sense.
People find themselves on islands. You can't run away from yourself. I find people who come here and live here, they change. The name itself, Aran, it says Aran and Niamh, or kidney. Ar is the old Irish word for your kidney. And it's known as Aran and Niamh, or the kidney of the saints. And the metaphorical term, I think, in there is that you came to be cleansed. The kidney cleanses us, and Aran cleanses you. And when you leave, you can be a very different person, yeah. And it might take some time. Some people end up here for a lifetime, you know. I tell you, watch out.
Island life is very different to the life I lead, but I can see its appeal. I have a great respect for those who live a more remote existence. I'll definitely be back, but for now, as I travel on up the western coast, I feel like I'm getting closer to home.